Hello everyone, and welcome to this new webinar. Today we are very lucky to have one of the UK's top experts in women's health, and she's working with lots of clubs, organizations, and dance company. This is actually where we met her through a common, I will say, client, the National Ballet of Scotland, and she's working with them, and they are using our athlete monitoring. So that's why we came in touch. So without further talking, welcome Nicky. Thank you very much for doing this for us. We'll all learn, and now I'll give you the microphone. It's your turn.
Thanks, Francois, for the kind introduction, and welcome everyone listening into this, especially in these strange times. It's really great to connect with everyone out there, wherever you are, and actually try and focus on something positive, I hope. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world at the moment, but one thing that is certain is that women have menstrual cycles, and also at some point we will all be able to return to whatever our sport or activity is. So this is sort of looking forward, and as I say, hopefully something positive. Okay, so these are the sort of things I want to cover in this talk. I want to discuss with you the integration of external factors with internal chronometers. And of course, one of these crucial internal chronometers is the female menstrual cycle. So I want to take you through the hormones, the effects, what it's important to look out for, and then concluding really with the practical measures. Information can we get from monitoring menstrual cycles? And as I've said there at the bottom, the aim is that through supporting each individual athlete or dancer, then ultimately you will build a stronger team if you've got stronger individuals.
Yeah.
So what do I mean exactly by integrated periodization? So the external factors I think we're very familiar with, training load, nutrition, and recovery. But with regard to the internal bio-chronometers, those are really, I'm talking particularly about the hormones. Hormones, as you know, internal chemical messengers, and they're crucial because they mediate the adaptive changes to training and therefore improve performance. And one of the key hormone systems, networks, are those hormones involved in the female menstrual cycle. And there's a range of different timescales of all of these factors, both internal and external, that we need to take into account. I mean, this is a busy slide on purpose to really demonstrate how complex it is. So as I say, I think we're all familiar with the top layer, the external factors, the various micro, mesocycle, macro cycle for the training. You can see there, sleep, recovery, diet. But really it's what's going on underneath. Literally within the body. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about internal chronometers, okay? And especially many of the hormone systems have an inbuilt internal periodicity to them. And so this is just to re-emphasize that fact why hormone networks are so crucial. So the body likes to stay in a nice steady state through the mechanism called homeostasis. So if you give some external perturbation in terms of exercise and nutrition, that's going to cause knock-on effects on those exercising tissues, the muscles, the bone, and the gut. They release short-term and short-acting chemicals called exocrines, but those are under the control, the big boss in the hierarchy of control, your screen. If you get that right in terms of timing, then you will get a positive adaptive response, and then you start to train again, and then your next session you'll be fitter. But it can go wrong if you don't quite get that synchronicity really optimized. Again, this is just to show you how complex it is. If you get it wrong, for example, in terms of nutrition, if you're in a low energy availability state, not providing, the athlete is not taking in enough fuel to cover training, then you can see there's a big, massive knock-on effect. This is just on the endocrine system, these endocrine networks. So focusing now specifically on one of these key endocrine networks, we're talking about the female hormones that are released in this, as you can see, periodic fashion during the menstrual cycle. So just a quick sort of revision of the menstrual cycle. You can see this is just sort of a textbook menstrual cycle. You can see on average the whole menstrual cycle lasts about 28 days, and it's punctuated more or less in the middle of that by ovulation. The phase before ovulation, that's called the follicular phase. So that's when the egg and the ovary is developing, ready to be ovulated, released. And then you can see everything after ovulation, that's called the luteal phase, dominated by the corpus luteum, secreting lots of progesterone. So you can see the follicular phase, you can see it's more of an estrogen dominant phase, whereas the luteal phase, the progesterone's higher. But you can see the point I'm trying to make about these hormones are complicated, and they're varying a lot. So it's, you can understandably, as a woman, you're might feel slightly different according to which phase of the cycle you're in. But just to emphasize, menstrual cycle is normal physiology. And actually having menstruation is a very handy clinical sign. It's a barometer of healthy hormones, as I call it. So it gives you an indication that you have got the integration of external factors correct. And it's a vital training metric for top performing athletes. And you can see there the US World Cup winners, they all track their cycles. Gwen Jorgensen, she tracked all her cycles as well. I mean, what's so good about these menstrual cycles? It's actually these key hormones, estrogen and progesterone. These are the key female hormones, and we know from evidence in women who aren't having regular menstrual cycles, there are problems in terms of bone health, increased risk of stress fractures, cardiovascular health is not so great, adverse lipid profile, and actually neurological function. And this is fascinating. There are studies to show that in women whose periods have stopped, their balance and coordination is impaired. So menstrual cycles, they might be slightly problematic, but actually, it's great. These hormones are great for you if you're a woman, especially if you're trying to exercise to your top level. So therefore, any disturbances in the cycle, that's a warning sign that something is amiss internally. And these are the definitions that we use in the UK, at least, from the Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. So every woman should have started her periods by the age of 16. Any woman who has absent menstrual cycles for 6 months or more, that's called amenorrhea. And if they have less than 9 periods per calendar year, again, that's another warning sign that something is amiss. So I know there are some, we've heard, some coaches, even some doctors are saying, oh, well, it's normal for female athletes not to have periods. I mean, I'm afraid that's absolutely incorrect. These are really important variation of hormones for female health. There are some physiological causes, obviously pregnancy. Your periods will stop. There are some medical causes, and then there's some functional issues. And there's also the hormonal contraception, and this is an interesting one, just to quickly touch on that. That, of course, it's every woman's choice if she wishes to use hormonal contraception. And these are the two main types that are available: progesterone only, which tends not to give any withdrawal bleed, and the combined oral contraceptive pill. But there are some, as I said, there are some notes on the combined oral contraceptive. Important to stress, take the combined oral contraceptive pill, it will regulate my periods. Yes, it will, but there are some little sort of small print things to note, that there are some reports that it can increase the inflammatory markers, as you can see there in the second reference. So, we have to be conscious when athletes are making these decisions. So let's get on to the meat of this. I think hopefully I've emphasized why menstrual cycles are so crucial for women, because there's this cyclical production of beneficial female hormones, and any problem, therefore, if you're tracking the cycle, you will get an early warning sign if the athlete is reporting that they're not having menstrual cycles. So the way I would deal with that. In the first instance, obviously, it could be that the athlete simply is forgetting to record them. So that needs to be, obviously, you have to ask them. But then, if that is indeed not the case, that they are not having cycles, then you can pick that up quickly and pretty easily if you're tracking them. And then you can discuss with the athlete and investigate and have a look at what's happening with the periodization of their training load and their energy intake and their recovery. Maybe this is going awry and that's what's caused their periods to switch off. And that's when we come to the to discuss here of low energy availability. And that is the underlying problem in REDS, relative energy deficiency in sport. And I'm hoping that you may have heard of that term. So what exactly do I mean by that? So this little diagram here, imagine these are three different athletes. So in the center, the athlete in the center has got it right. All the food, all the energy you require, that obviously comes from the food that you eat. And that's partitioned into the two main demands to cover the energy demand from training, shown in the blue block, and then any residual energy, so-called, that's what we call energy availability. That is required to just keep your body ticking over. Even if you were to lie in bed all day, you need quite a lot of energy actually to keep just ticking over. And this in women includes maintaining regular menstrual cycles. So you can see this athlete in the center has got it right. They're fueling sufficiently to cover both their the energy demand from their training and also to maintain good health. And in women, that would be regular cycles. If you consider now the athlete on your right, you will see that this athlete is eating, intaking the same amount of food as the fellow athlete in the middle. However, they've got a higher training load. Maybe it's a training camp or maybe it's just a high-level training block. But the net result is you can see now they've got reduced energy availability. And if this were a female athlete, it may be that their periods would stop. The athlete on the left of your screen also is in the red, in low energy availability. This could be an athlete that intentionally has reduced what they're taking in, and this is particularly true in sports where being of low body weight confers or is perceived to confer a performance advantage. So I'm talking about gravitational sports. So I'm talking about road cycling, I'm talking about climbing, I'm talking about long distance running, also athletic sports, rhythmic gymnastics, and athletic disciplines such as ballet. So energy availability in REDS is can be a major issue for athletes. And in women, you can pick this up quickly because their periods will be will either stop or become irregular. And it's vital that this is detected early because there are effects both on the athlete health and ultimately on the athlete performance. So obviously, if you're tracking these cycles, then you're going to pick up this early warning sign of any irregular menstrual cycles or lack of menstrual cycles. And so in the first instance, of course, consider medical issues, but then you would sort of refer the athlete on to someone like me. But initially, the first thing is to have a look and review their training load and nutritional intake. It may be that they have intentionally or unintentionally either increased their training load or doing extra training that they haven't recorded is a possibility, and or their nutritional intake. Have they unintentionally or intentionally reduced their energy intake? So this is why menstrual cycle, the first reason why menstrual tracking is vital, because you can detect problems early and have a look and see what's going on. So the other main thing, area where menstrual cycle tracking is important, is if the woman is, the female athlete is reporting they're having menstrual cycles, but is there a mismatch in their well-being report and their perceived exertion training load? And is that always coinciding with a particular phase of the menstrual cycle for the athlete? And potential problematic phases of the cycle for an athlete could be the actual time when you're menstruating, they may be experiencing abdominal cramps. It could be in the mid-cycle when the egg is being released, or frankly more commonly the luteal phase. And you probably all heard of premenstrual syndrome, and that's, as the Royal College definition, is that there's a cyclical recurrence of symptoms 2 weeks before menstruation. And you can easily pick this up with athlete monitoring, because of course your athlete is giving their daily wellbeing report, and there is now hopefully the possibility that the female athlete will also be recording their cycle. So you'll be able to easily see if this coincides every time they report they're not feeling so great. Is that coinciding with one of the phases of these cycles, in particular the luteal phase? And this is a brilliant presentation by Dr. Robin, the try and detect any problematic phases of the cycle. And as I mentioned, these are the three areas that you're particularly looking at. It could be the actual menstruation stage, which typically is like 5 days at the beginning of the cycle. So the athlete could be, suffering with abdominal cramps. Obviously, there will be blood loss. And so what action are you going to take if you notice this? That you're going to be ensuring or reminding the athlete to have a good iron intake at that time, and also the type of training. I mean, obviously there are lots of different sports involved in athlete monitoring, but for example, sometimes stretching out, I used to find swimming was quite good to relieve cramps or something like that. So maybe just looking if there's a type of training that would help the athlete at that time. Pre-ovulation, we know there's good evidence that there's an increased risk of ACL injury, anterior cruciate ligament injury. It's thought because that's when the estrogen is very high, if you remember from that graph, and that influences the strength of the connective tissue, is the theoretical reason why risk is higher at this time of the cycle. So if you know that, if you know when your athlete is about mid-cycle, or around ovulation, just before ovulation, then again, if your athlete is involved in a sport that requires rapid change of direction, football or something like this, then you just have to be sure that the athlete is aware of this and they've got a good background in proprioceptive work to control the stability of the joint at that time. I mean, listen, accidents happen, but if anything preventative that you can put in place to prevent an injury is obviously a good thing. And the luteal phase, that's, if you remember, that's the phase of the menstrual cycle just after ovulation has occurred and before the start of the next menstrual cycle. And this is the most frequently associated with issues. The reason is because the progesterone is very high. And this has many effects, as you can see there. So interestingly, it increases basal metabolic rate. So there's actually a slight increase in temperature. So that is what you might have heard of, the ovulation thermometer. That indicates you have ovulated. Your temperature goes up just very slightly. But this can, of course, be problematic for an athlete in terms of being able to sleep, or if it's very hot, in their training, keeping cool. Also, there's a slight suboptimal blood sugar control. So if the athlete is reporting those sort of symptoms, and that coincides on the menstrual monitoring that's in their luteal phase, then obviously the action is you can give them advice regarding that, about keeping cool, having a really good consistent intake of fuel. That will help. So this sort of sums up what I've just said about the main phases of the cycle which might be problematic. So there's menstruation itself with the cramps potentially and loss of iron. There's the increased risk of ACL injury, well documented just before ovulation, so you need to be aware of that. And then the luteal phase classically is the time, if there is going to be a problem, that's when it might happen because of an increased metabolic rate. And so being able to have that on record and correlating it with a wellness report is a really, really useful and frankly a very straightforward tool. So here's an example. So say you have got a team and you've been asking your athletes to track their menstrual cycle, And then at any particular time, you will know where they are in their cycle. So combined oral contraceptive pill, that's the forward, and then the progesterone-only pill, that's the other forward. In the midfield, you can see that athlete is menstruating. So you've already given them, you've preempted that, you've given them the advice about make sure you've got a good iron intake. The next midfield follicular phase, so this classically is often actually a good time. The athlete feels fine, so there's no problems there. The next one is ovulating, so you've given them the advice, be cautious, have you done your proprioceptive work, have you done your pre-activation of the stabilizing muscles around your knee joint. The other midfield, that's the luteal phase. So this athlete typically does have problems during that phase and feeling really hot and difficulty sleeping. So you've already preempted that, given them the advice about keeping cool, etc. The two athletes in the backs, PCOS, that stands for polycystic ovary syndrome. Haven't got time to discuss that today. The other back, two missed cycles. Well, you need to do a pregnancy test on that person, that female athlete. Functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, in other words, no periods for 6 months. Well, frankly, that player shouldn't be on the pitch. They should be investigated and, and of course the goalie unknown. Well, you need to have a word with the goalie and say, look, it'd be really useful if you can record it. So sense how I suggest you could approach things. I could have written this, this is a football team, but I could have written this as put this as a corps de ballet, for example, depending on their roles in the ballet company, you see. So just sort of last two slides, just to sort of sum up. The three athlete behaviors, which, and these behaviors are obviously under the control of the athlete: training load, recovery, and nutrition. And if you get those all nicely periodized, integrated, then you're going to be on top form. As we've discussed, if you're in low energy availability, then that can potentially raise the risk of REDS, relative energy deficiency in sport. And if you're not recovering sufficiently, then you could be at risk for your athlete developing non-functional overeating and even overtraining syndrome. But why that is crucial for, particularly crucial for female athletes, as I said there, that this sort of basic functionality of these three factors, that will vary according to the menstrual phase, and also there'll be individual variation between women. So that's why, collecting the data for your female athletes, then you'll be able to, in a better position, to be able to give them personalized advice. So I hope I've convinced you that the menstrual monitoring is very important for athletes and dancers. These are really the crucial elements why that hormones are vital for mediating adaptive changes, and they have their own internal periodicity. So we have to respect those and be mindful of those. And of course, the classic is the menstrual cycle. I've shown you how complex the variation of the hormones are during the cycle. So we have to take that into account. And also that female athletes are different. So it's a requirement really to monitor and gather more data, information on them. And then once you are armed with that extra information, you are in a much better position to be able to personalize recommendations. And so ultimately, as I've said there, they will become better and stronger individual athletes, and therefore a stronger team overall. Okay, I'm on time. Hooray. Okay, Francois.
Well,
that's it. How was that?
Well, that was incredible. That was amazing. Thank you very much. Very, very interesting and very well documented. Very, very useful. So I really, really enjoyed it. So maybe we have time now for a few questions.
Yes, please. Oh, Robin's there. Can you hear me? Thank you for your presentation the other day. That inspired me. The graphic that you displayed, I thought that was a relevant point about if there's a mismatch between their well-being report and their perceived exertion. Maybe that missing factor is actually the menstrual cycle or a phase in that's problematic.
No, that was a great presentation. I appreciate it. And that information that I presented, I received a little bit of that direction from Tim Gabbett and his work in load management, as well as Francois. So, but
many credits
for using it.
No, well, exactly. I thought it was a really sort of, it really struck a chord with me. It's like, exactly, this is the missing thing. This is why, talking with Francois and saying, listen, I think, please, can we, it's really important we add in, if possible, the facility for female athletes to track their menstrual cycles. I mean, I think that many female athletes, or women in general, probably are tracking their cycles somewhere. I mean, whether it's on an old-fashioned pen and paper or whatever it is, I think most women are. So it just seems logical to me to have it all in one place. And then it's side by side with, training log, well-being, and then also for the athlete themselves. Suddenly the penny may drop for them. It's like, oh, well, no wonder. I'm always in this phase of the cycle, and that's always when I'm feeling good, bad, whatever it is. So actually it's information for the athlete themselves, apart from, of course, the coach and the doctor and whatever, actually for the athlete themselves to inform themselves.
If I may, I've heard from some coaches, and I think, just being a part of team sports for a long time, what's nice is that once you have a team in place, a lot of their cycles tend to come together.
Yeah.
And so yeah, you can deal with all of the issues at the same time. And so then you can put that into your training cycles as well. Are you still there?
Oh, sorry, you just cut out. You went a bit funny.
Okay.
So you were just saying that lots of team sports, they tend to sync their cycles.
Yes, they tend to sync their cycles, and so then you can put that into your training load.
Oh, well, listen, that makes it super easy, doesn't it? I mean, I gave my example of all the players being in different phases and whatever on the pitch, which, but if they're all synced, I guess that makes it even easier. But nevertheless, if you're not in that situation, still having the information, and there might be some commonality, some threads amongst the players themselves, that they're all reporting having heavy legs or whatever during the luteal phase. So certain patterns will evolve, I think.
Yes. Well, thank you. That was very
my pleasure. Anyone else for any questions?
I do, if no one else has a question.
Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead first.
Oh, hi, Nicky. Hi. My name's Ollie Phillips. I'm actually the head coach for the Welsh women's rugby team.
Oh, hi.
Hiya. And I just was. It's really intriguing, and we're sort of educating ourselves all the time around a lot of this, a lot of these areas. But I was just wondering if there are any platforms in particular that you find helpful. The reason why I'm asking is we have to manage our players relatively remotely because of the fact that the game hasn't gone fully professional yet. So they are semi-professional / amateur, some of them. So the contact time that we have with them is limited. So I was just wondering if there were any, excellent platforms that you have come across that you think enable, a really great understanding and a continual monitoring of the menstrual cycle and therefore the management of the player, rather than I know them inputting it on at the moment we're using Google Sheets and things like that.
Oh yeah, well, without sounding too partisan, and by the way, Francois isn't paying me to do this presentation, so and I haven't got shares in athlete monitoring. I have to declare I have no vested interests, but like Francois said at the beginning, the reason I even knew about athlete monitoring because I work with Scottish Ballet. And I was so impressed. It's like, oh, this is great. Athlete monitoring, they can record all their wellness and their training loads, and facility to put other notes on there. But then, to my mind, this is a great system. But then I said to Francois, hold on a sec, but you haven't got, what about the female dancers or athletes? Can't we have menstrual monitoring on there? So that is what Francois has now developed, and I'm going to be using it with Scottish Ballet. Well, as soon as the world goes back to normal, but even nevertheless, this is also the other thing, like you were saying. In any case, now in general, it's moving to remote. So at the moment, it's there isn't one place where everything happens together, if you know what I mean, because we have menstrual monitoring apps for fertility, plenty of those on the market, but equally, and we have things like, Training Peaks, Strava, all this, but those are just the training load. But actually, there is currently nothing that integrates all of these together. So without sounding, as I say, and honestly, this is not me promoting athlete monitoring. Honestly, I'm not vested in that, but that is what I'm trying to develop with Francois, that there is a facility to do that. And obviously in the fullness of time, then the information can be added to that. But I agree about the Google Sheets. I mean, it's great that you are recording, but obviously having it in different places is difficult.
I think the other issue is then giving that data, if you like, relevance. Because
of course. Well, I think in the first instance, I think you did you say you were a coach, Ollie?
Yes, yeah. I'm head coach.
But I think, I mean, you know what, Ollie? From what I've just said, I mean, okay, I'm approaching it from a medical point of view, but the first principles. A coach, if you're seeing that the athlete isn't recording anything, then you ask them, oh, what's happening? And if actually they haven't got any periods, then that's a massive red light. So, and equally, if it looks like something going a bit weird with their periods, they're stopping and starting, and I don't know, then, like I said at the beginning, then you can have a look at their training load and seeing what's going on. Is it they haven't got their nutrition right? Or if they're always reporting that they're feeling really fatigued, and it corresponds on your recording that's always in a certain time of the cycle. I agree that bit of the advice, that would have to be further developed. But I think, you coaches probably, frankly, are best placed because you know exactly what you're familiar with the athlete as individuals. What's their training load, what's going on. So I think, and also for the female athlete to be able to record it somewhere. I mean, as a male coach, I don't know, because some male coaches I know, some find it quite awkward to ask that sort of thing, but it's less confronting if they just record it on a system, isn't it? It's kind of easier.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That is. It's just then making sure that I don't know. So your little football diagram that you drew up of the football team and of different players in the different areas of their cycle, actually educating the people at our end in terms of from the coaching side too, in terms of our whole the relevance of that information to what they can and can't do.
Sure. Well, that would have to be something developed, or otherwise I'll come and talk to you guys.
That's what I would recommend.
I mean, exactly. Listen, here am I volunteering myself. I'd be very happy to give a sort of a version of what I've just said to anyone out there, any clubs or whatever, so that just straightforward stuff. I mean, what I gave just now was a little bit, obviously it would depend who I was. So I would be happy to do that for sure. And actually nowadays, seeing as we are all sort of stuck wherever we are, I mean, doing it remotely like this is actually fine, isn't it? So yeah, I think you've got...
May I make a suggestion?
Yes,
This is Robin.
Yeah.
I have found, especially as a coach, you have so much on your plate. And that's what I dealt with Jen Rockwood. She's a D1 soccer coach, that I actually had to feed her the information because you have so much on your plate. It's nice to have someone there to kind of give you the information so you know what you're looking for. And once you understand the information, then you can go back and train your people to do it for you. But sometimes what happens is you have so much on your plate that it gets missed because the actual utilization of the information is kind of hard to understand.
Thank you, Robin. That's a very good point. I'm not expecting you, Ollie, to do everything. My suggestion would be, I'd be very happy if you want to get in contact with me and, as you say, Robin, give that educational thing. and work it out like that. So Ollie, do you want to get in touch with me directly? I think you'll find my details. Well, you can see it there on my slide. That's my website. And anyway, Francois, I think, is going to be sharing my Francois.
Yes.
I'm very happy if you want to give people my email, by
Sure.
the way.
Yes.
And if anyone wants to discuss this potential of education or whatever, I'd be very happy to do so. Thanks, Robin, for that suggestion. Thanks.
Of course, we'll do that. Also, just a little word about the platform and the software side of things. We already have implemented the menstrual cycle tracker in athlete monitoring. So right now, athletes are able to record their menstrual cycle as part of their wellness questionnaire. So instead of just having questions about fatigue, sleep, soreness, and so on, they can also indicate the blood flow and the level of pain. So based on that, then the phase of the cycle can be detected, and so that's already available. And what's coming up within the next few weeks is going to be a complete analysis of this information with alerts and recommendations. So this is so the first part, the data collection is there, but the analysis, the automated alerts and everything, that's currently being implemented. So that's going to be available within a few weeks. And we are working with Nicky and her contacts and friends to implement that.
Cool. Yeah, well, listen, that's a very good point, Francois, because you were talking about the logic behind it. So I'm be very happy to help. So ultimately, it could be an automated thing, couldn't it? Like you say, an automated advice. But I think also the face-to-face, like Robin pointed out, the face-to-face education, that would also be helpful as well. So
of course, yeah.
Cool. Anyone else? For anyone else, any questions?
No, but I want to say hi to you guys on the other side of the world.
Thank you.
Hi.
I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah.
All right. How's it there?
Snowy.
Really? Oh,
It
interesting.
snowed today.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, it's nice and sunny here in England, and for the moment, we're still allowed out once a day to do exercise. So I either do ballet class in my house because ballet studios are shut at the minute, or fortunately I can go for a little cycle around Richmond Park, which is very close. But I know some of you other guys are literally confined indoors. So yeah, hopefully this madness will, well, who knows? But anyway, on a more positive note, Francois, I think should we round up now, Francois?
I think so. If there are no more questions, we can just finish and round up the webinar. Yes.
Well, thanks, Francois, for the invitation. Thanks everyone for listening. And Francois, please let people know my email if there are any further questions. And Francois, yeah, we'll have a chat
yes.
in a few weeks, as you say, to work out some extra facility with the new menstrual monitoring at athlete monitoring. But I think this is a really important step forward for female athletes and dancers. So thank you very much.